Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World, the Practical Voice Podcast. Today's guest is Yann Lachelle. He is the COO of Snips. Now, if you don't know about Snips, you probably do, for those listeners who've been either listening to the podcast for a while or those that are involved in the voice industry, you've probably come across Snips. But if you don't, Snips is leading the European charge in the voice assistant and AI space, and our guest today, Yann, he's such an interesting guy. Seriously, he's so knowledgeable. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's founded and sold countless companies. He's now working with Snips, helping them build out their product offering, and we're going to be getting into detail about all things Snips, all things privacy in the voice space, what the value proposition is for Snips and how it differs from some of the big players, some of the challenges that the small players, Snips as well as Mycroft and Houndify and some of the others are facing, and what the solutions to some of those challenges are. This is an episode that it's not one where we're going to be dishing out practical tips and insights. It's more of a real deep dive into the marketplace, into the AI industry, into edge computing, we touch on blockchain, and some of the things that Snips are doing to try and counter the cloud first approach that some of these companies have been built on. So this is one to pay attention to. It is so fascinating. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is Yann Lachelle, and this is VUX World. Yann Lachelle, welcome to VUX World.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. It's been a long time coming. We met in London a couple of months back, and for various reasons we've had a baby that's arrived and all that sort of stuff, so I know we've had to kind of reschedule a few things and that, so really, really appreciate you making the time and joining us today. Really excited for this. Hello there, Dustin, as well. Dustin is here, of course.
Hey, Kane. How's it going on your end?
Yeah, good. You two you could be neighbours right now, because Yann, you're in Paris as well, are you?
We're based in Paris, yes. Most of the company is based here.
Yes, and Dustin, I'm presuming you're in Paris right now?
Yeah, I am for the moment. So I think we're not far away from you.
Cool. So, Yann, tell the VUX World audience a little bit about who you are and a little bit about what you do.
Okay, so a bit about me. Essentially, I started coding when I was 10 years old. So I'm very much into tech. I'm 47 years old today.
Today?
So, yeah. Well, actually, no.
Right.
A few weeks ago, but today I'm 47. That means I've been dabbling in technology for the past 37 years. And I've always been working in software. So first as a hacker, as a teenage hacker, and later on as a computer scientist, as an engineer in various companies working in financial software or cartoon animation industry. So that was for the first part of my career. And second part, as an entrepreneur. So I built a number of companies in social networking, in mobile apps, in mobile advertising. And it's only later that I joined Snips as a COO. And Snips is a company that builds voice assistants using AI. And I was coding neural networks in 1992 on Next machines. At the time, neural networks weren't very good. And I didn't pursue that route, but I was coding neural networks, without much frameworks or anything. The theory was there, but it was not really, really impressive at the time, and you had to wait weeks and weeks for things to occur. So this is who I am, engineer, software engineer, entrepreneur, repeat entrepreneur, and with Snips, helping a team grow their project and the company with a very ambitious goal, which is to make technology disappear using AI. So this is me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And you're not lying about being an entrepreneur. Some people give themselves the title entrepreneur because it's quite cool, but you look through your LinkedIn your LinkedIn profile, and it's founded this company, founded that company, founded co-founder, owner, and it is literally, there's probably 4 or 5 companies that you've created and what presumably either sold or moved on or something like that. You've been
yeah, absolutely. So I sold them all actually. This
Wow.
is a pristine track record of going full cycle, because I'm fully aware that startups are very fragile. Most of them don't make it. And what really matters is to be part of an ecosystem. When you think ecosystem, you think that your company will become, soil for the next generation to grow. So what really matters is to recycle the talent, recycle the ideas, make sure that you transform whatever you worked on. And building a startup is like building a product itself. A startup is a product that sells to another company that may need it, may need to accelerate or whatnot. So today, I almost call myself a professional entrepreneur. In other words, I do this for a living. I don't necessarily work for large groups because I don't see my value there. I see my value as bringing an idea to fruition, to the market. And if it grows, then great. Maybe I'm not the person to grow that particular company, maybe the next one. But I certainly am a product person as well. And very early in my life, I was considering what software could bring as a productivity improvement or as a solution to solve something. So for me, software is a great enabler for that. And I've been given the ability to code from an early age. So that gave me a special power.
Yeah, and so you mentioned something that was quite interesting there around a startup building a product and being part of an ecosystem. So the whole voice ecosystem seems to be growing, quite rapidly, certainly over this year. How would you describe Snips's position within the voice ecosystem?
So it's a complicated topic because voice isn't new. It's been around for a while. Voice synthesis has been around for 20, 30 years easily. Speech recognition almost as long. It's more complex, but it's been around. Performance wasn't that great. And adoption comes from a various set of vectors improving at the same time. Remember when Steve Jobs announced the iPhone, he actually said 3 times, repeating the 3 words, a phone, an iPod, and a browser. And he said it 3 times. What this means is convergence, right? So, phones had been around for a while. The iPod and MP3 players had been around for a while. Browsers had been around for a while. But bringing the 3 together creates a new paradigm shift, which became the smartphone economy for the past decade. So again, voice is one thing and was largely used for professional applications in niche markets. Some players, like if you think Nuance is a player that's been around for a while. They've been around for 20 years, and no one knows of them, but they're established. Why? Because they've been growing on various generations of technologies. Today, the companies that are pushing voice are typically Apple first, because Apple came up with Siri first in a mass market value proposition. So Siri is the first instance of a general purpose, massively distributed voice assistant. And of course, Google followed suit. So the voice ecosystem starts, and we have to thank the Googles and Apples of the world that have brought this technology to the market. And we could question whether we're just at the beginning or if we're about to reach a plateau. It's questionable. The first, I'm pretty sure everyone remembers when Siri was launched, it wasn't that great. People were deceived. And I think there will be a long way until we have true general purpose assistants. And Snips is positioned as an alternative. Why? Because we've created a technology that is built on one constraint. And that constraint is privacy by design. In other words, what the companies that I mentioned earlier, the platforms, the big platforms, they were created 20 years ago or more, which means that they were created with the idea of cloud-centric architectures. And Snips was created 5 years ago by 3 PhDs in machine learning. And I met them when I joined the company 3.5 years ago. But these guys were Generation Y and Generation Z, right? And these guys, they've had enough of the cloud model. They've had enough of companies, sucking all of the data from them and building models on top of them without being fully transparent about the value that was brought to them. So typical, free to play and monetizing on your back. So this paradigm created some sort of an unease where what can we do to actually provide technology that enhances our lives in a way that does not invade my privacy? And so this is how Snips was created. What can we do with AI to build personal assistants that respect my privacy? And when you look at the voice ecosystem, and so let's talk about general purpose consumer voice assistants like Google Home and Siri and Alexa, they are built not as smart speakers, they are built as smart microphones, right? The device itself isn't smart. It's a smart microphone. And so in a way, it's a always on microphone surveillance system. And this is where we reach the point or the threshold where the comfort zone may not be great for everybody. It's not for me. I don't know for you, but the benefits of using these assistants today may start to become very interesting. The entertaining value is there for sure. The usage is being developed, but the point is, for some people, it's an absolutely no way. And so Snips provides a different way to provide voice assistance by dealing with the voice processing on the edge. And it's interesting because if you hear about new trends, edge computing, blockchain, voice processing like we do, this is part of a new momentum. This is part of a new trend. Edge is the new cloud. Blockchain decentralizes what otherwise was centralized. So we are reaching a new moment in the evolution of computing where people are innovating in a radically or orthogonal way, and Snips is part of that movement. So blockchain, AI, decentralized edge computing, it's a new way of bringing certain things such as voice, and Snips clearly was created later than the other guys. So we're benefiting from the technology, the algorithms, the data that was made available to us. So we're going a little faster, in fact. We caught up with the state of the art when it comes to voice recognition.
Go on, Dustin, looks like you're shaping up there.
And so outside of the privacy, obviously privacy is an important thing, although I think we're seeing a lot of people are happy to put these devices without worrying too much about privacy in their homes. Are there other benefits that come about because Snips is going to be on that device?
Absolutely. And in fact, it's one thing to say privacy is a feature in France or Europe. It's one thing to say it in China, and in the US, it brings different different value to the alphabet. No, clearly, this constraint is our DNA. Now, we built it so that it was working on the edge, which solves a huge problem. We actually make it so small that it fits on a tiny computer. Therefore, there is no dependency on the cloud. Therefore, there is huge resilience to internet outages, which means it works when cloud is not available. So think the devices or vehicles that move at fast speed. Think planes. We're talking to a submarine manufacturer. So on the edge, on the device, voice assistance when it comes to those devices is critical. Think security. Devices that are autonomous, individually operated, are much harder to breach because hackers are mostly interested when the stakes are high. So they tend to attack cloud operations because they can access many, many different accounts and tap different feeds. When there's a edge device, you have to attack each edge. And the cost to attack is much harder. So you do find a lot of value by providing a decentralized model. And if you think about the network cost, think about when you have to compel your Alexa to turn on the light. Your voice is being shipped to Seattle to turn on your light at home. It's a binary switch that if it can work locally, it should work locally. There's no reason your voice should be shipped across the planet, implicating cost of bandwidth and so on and so forth. Again, what we're doing today was not possible a couple of years ago. So the model that Alexa brings to the table made sense a few years ago.
And do you get any personalization benefits as well by the fact that this lives on the device, or are we going to get better speech-to-text speech recognition, speech-to-text conversion, entity and intent detection as well?
So this is a novelty for us. I'm glad you bring this up because it's actually very technical. But when you talk about voice assistance and voice recognition, you have to distinguish the different modules. The first module is the wake word, where you call out for the assistant, Alexa, hey Snips. This is a typical wake word. We build wake words for our customers, so it could be anything. That's the wake word. Then there's the ASR, automatic speech recognition, and then there's the NLU part, and then the dialogue part. Now, the ASR is the oldest piece that existed throughout the time, and the ASR used to be mono speaker. Then it became multi-speaker or speaker agnostic, and typically used for transcription. So the ASRs were calibrated for full vocabulary. And as you perhaps know, Microsoft features the lowest word error rate in its ASR. It's like 4%. So technically, Microsoft's ASR is better than the human ear at listening to words. But the thing is, the human brain is capable of understanding much better than Microsoft ASR is. Why? Because of context, because we have memory, because we have a cognitive system that allows us to discern, in a subtle way, the difference between a word and the other, when in fact they're homonyms, but in terms of the sense and meaning, it's not. What we've done is build an ASR that is configured and miniaturized and specialized to the use case. So that means that we'll hear the words that are meant to be heard in a much more obvious way with very little mistakes. So the performance is increased. And recently, because we have the constraint of being on device, it means we don't have typical cloud-based feeds, right? What we can do, however, is inject dynamically into our ASR local vocabulary, which gives us the ability to personalize the ASR. So one of the most complex use cases around is the music assistant use case. And as you know, musical tastes varies per individual, and catalogs include millions of items. And the way to pronounce artists and composers and musicians and singers varies from one country to another, and we listen to international tunes quite a bit. Actually, just one example that springs to mind. In France, everyone says Michael Jackson, which sounds correct. They should actually be saying Michael Jackson if they were to say it phonetically as a French word. They don't, because it turns out they say it properly. But if you have an ASR for French, it will have a hard time. We have built a system that actually manages to inject local vocabulary, local slots and intents, so that the ASR is customized to you. And so we have the disadvantage of not being centrally dispatched. We have the advantage of being able to provide an ear, a voice assistant that has an ear that is calibrated to you.
How does that work in practice then? So for example, if you need to collaborate the ASR for every use case, then are you talking kind of in a B2B environment? For example, if you were to put Snips in a coffee machine, then you would do it there. Or are you talking in a kind of B2C environment? So I know that you're looking at releasing a smart speaker soon. Is that something that a user would have to do? Is they would have to calibrate their own ASR side of things? Does that make sense? How do you go about how does that work in practice?
Let me use a different use case. Right now, when you ask Siri or Google to call someone in your address book, what's happening is that your voice is being shipped to the ASR, and the ASR cloud side has to reconcile the general purpose ASR with the words that are in your address book. So the resolution is done on the NLP, NLU side, leading to confusion. In our case, if the ASR is local, let's say a smart speaker that is also perhaps even a home phone, if your address book is loaded locally, the ASR will take a cue from your address book, words, including exotic names, which is very difficult to solve, and will accurately recognize them, dynamically. So we actually do retraining of the ASR using actual text injection. So the user doesn't have to do anything, but the integrator or whoever develops the product has to create some sort of a dynamic process where you take the things that change that need to be recognized. So let's say you have a coffee machine, and the coffee machine, you can ask it to do tea and coffee, and the manufacturer suddenly adds chocolate, right? Then chocolate has to come with an update over the air, and that's injected into the model, and it's solved.
How would that work then if it happens on the edge, which, correct me if I'm wrong, would mean that it happens on the device without being needed to be connected to the cloud? How would a manufacturer of that coffee machine get that chocolate update onto the device if everything happens on the device? Presumably there's some sort of connection to the internet in some way, shape or form.
Yes. So again, Snips was built with the idea of processing the voice on the device. It doesn't mean the device is not connected. In fact, it's up to the device manufacturer to decide if it's connected to the cloud. Now, take the example of a coffee machine. You go to the shop, you buy the coffee machine, you plug it in, and the device manufacturer says, oh, sorry, you have to have an account on Amazon Alexa. It's kind of a bummer. Forces you to be with one school or the other. Now, with Snips, we're proposing to put Snips, say, in a coffee machine. You buy the coffee machine, you plug it in, and it comes with a defined set of features. It will work without connectivity for the next 10 years, no problem. No questions asked, and no dependency on any third-party service. Now, that's good for the coffee or device manufacturer. If the coffee is connected, and actually, why not use the voice to actually set up the Wi-Fi password? That would be cool. But if you connect the machine, then the machine is suddenly connected, and you can tell it, hey, George, update your firmware now. Right? And George can say, sorry, I have no connectivity, or I have connectivity, I'm updating the software. And by the way, there's a new item that was loaded. So the item can be the update over the air, or the model, because Snips is both a piece of software and a model. Right? So we can update the model for the manufacturer, so they can have V2 of the model shipped over the air if the device is ever connected or brought back to service. It's an option. So building core functionalities within the device makes a lot of sense. Upgrading, of course, requires some sort of a connectivity at some point. But that's again, it's a choice. Having on-device brings core functionalities out of the box. Connectivity brings transactional value, which you would have no matter what in any connected device.
And are there any specialized hardware requirements for these devices? Can I put this on a Raspberry Pi if I wanted to?
Yes, so we started using the Raspberry Pi as the benchmark or reference design for us. And the Raspberry Pi allowed us, in fact, to be in relationship with 15,000 developers who found in our platform. And as you know, the makers, either Arduino or Raspberry Pi, are furiously independent and not necessarily work with the Google and Alexa platforms. And so our technology, which includes the ASR and the natural language understanding, can run on Raspberry Pi no problem. And Raspberry Pi is a typical cheap CPU device. We've also created a new product which works on microcontrollers, MCUs. So this is new, and we now are capable of building voice, including wake words, inside a tiny, tiny chip. You're talking the full package, including microphone and speakers, would typically be below $10. And we have announced a demo. In fact, there's a blog post on our site, as well as NXP's website, a description of that product. So NXP is our first partner for such a stack. And that stack can be implemented in any device, not necessarily providing true voice assistance, but instead voice commands, because whether we want it or not, voice is coming to us. It'll be everywhere, and consumers will be expecting voice commands everywhere. So we also have, let's say, an entry-level product with voice commands, maybe sequential, not natural language yet, but that's a super tiny requirement. And the minimal requirement for proper NLU is indeed a CPU with a 1 gigahertz processor, typically 1 gigabyte of RAM, and there you can do magic already.
That's interesting. So you mentioned two things at the beginning. One was edge computing, which we've kind of covered in terms of everything being handled on the device. The other thing was blockchain. Now that's another thing that gets kind of like thrown around, and I think a lot of people talk about it, and it's a very sort of popular sort of topic at the moment. And I seen an article. It was on TechCrunch, and I'll put the link in the show notes. It was around how Snips are either considering or going to be using blockchain. Can you tell us a little bit about blockchain and about how Snips are considering using blockchain in the work that you're doing?
Yes. So if you look at the ecosystem of voice technologies at large, a lot of it is driven by Alexa's marketing budget and Google's marketing budget and Apple's marketing budget. And these guys are competing with each other fiercely, right? They are trying to protect 1,000 billions of valuations against each other. And if you manage to get into the head of those guys, either they're colluding or they're trying to outcompete the others. Something really, really dangerous for the rest of the technologies, fields, and innovation, venture capital or not, is these companies are swallowing up everything like black holes, including data, and they're preventing other companies to emerge. So we think that the play has to be on a level playing field. And we realize that we've managed to actually attract 15,000 developers. And these people actually developed up to 25,000 voice assistants, whether it's just a little hack or a tentative learning expedition or whatnot, doesn't matter. We have 25,000 voice assistants of some sorts registered on our website. And we thought, well, it sounds like we have probably the number one developer community after the big platforms. And when you go talk to even an enterprise client, you find out that the decision maker is not the one cutting the check. It's the developer who's actually spent the time digging around and again, Google and Amazon and Apple, we love them dearly, right? They make great products, but they also have the ability to provide for free massive value to developers and then leverage that. So we decided that in order for us to be significant at scale, we should leverage the power of that community. And we thought, how can we provide also an alternative to Alexa in a way that brings value at the level that people expect, which is performing well, understanding intents, wide and large, providing value such as casual things, what's the weather like, and simple math calculations and all that. Well, we thought we just have to transfer the value of our developer community to a decentralized app store. And so this is how the blockchain came naturally to us. If we push the thinking that edge computing is good for consumers, then why not decentralize the app store? And I've worked in the app economy for a while. The app stores are definitely not long tail. They only promote the top 1% of the app store. It's not even 80-20. It's 99-1. Right? So app stores are flawed because they are centrally managed. So we thought about this community that we have. We thought about this technology that we have, the core technology. And we thought the blockchain is the perfect way to distribute the next generation of apps. And these are voice apps, of course. So we thought about this puzzle, this multi-dimensional puzzle, and we decided to launch a token sale around that. So the token will be the token of exchange so that you can use it to acquire apps. You can use it to share your CPU cycles for machine learning. You can use it to share your, to be paid back in a way for the data that you share, and so on and so forth. So it's a whole economy around the blockchain itself, holding and managing the currency itself with a truly decentralized and dedicated blockchain.
How will that help? You mentioned that the app stores promote the top 1%, and that's one of the things that gets spoke about quite a lot, is the whole discoverability thing. It's really hard to find, for example, Alexa skills or Google Assistant actions. If there's 50,000 of them and they only ever promote the top, it's probably not even the top 1% actually, because it's probably the top 20 or 30, isn't it? So how will that discoverability side of things work in practice on Snips because of the blockchain, and what way will the blockchain help? So in practice, how will discovering functionality for Snips actually happen? How would you describe the process?
So if you wish, there's a white paper 100 pages long that describes this. So the token sale is some sort of a Kickstarter project, if you wish. Huh? We have created the notion of limited supply of 10 billion tokens, and we're currently selling 1 billion of them to fund this B2C project. And this B2C project will take the form of a dedicated blockchain. And on the blockchain, we will build mechanisms where the tokenomics, the economics of the platform, including the peer-to-peer validation of the apps, including the reviews of the apps, will be self-governed. In other words, the blockchain and the smart contracts, for instance, typically allow for transparent and self-governance. So this is all described in the white paper. It's quite extensive, but again, it's not built yet, right? So we have the blueprint, and once we finalize and we reach the soft cap, typical of ICOs, we will go full throttle ahead. And on our website, there's a short video, a 1-minute video, that gives you a preview of what we have in mind. The device itself does not exist yet, but it gives you a good idea of our approach. It's a 1-minute video. It's quite nice, actually.
We'll link to that in the show notes, and also that white paper that you mentioned that kind of explains it. If anyone wants the actual detail, if you can whip us over the link, we can put it in the show notes, and people can find it there.
And then clearly, the white paper is pretty extensive about our ambition. We want the machine learning to be fully distributed and anonymized. In other words, no one owns anyone's data. And the models improve by using federated machine learning, and we've done quite a bit of work on encryption, so that you can encrypt the object that is being computed upon, and it's not decrypted, but it's nevertheless used for machine learning.
Before we move on, Dustin, have you got any other further queries on the Snips side of things?
No, I think there's a lot we could dig into. We could talk about this for hours. One thing that I am interested in is, let's say we don't want to do a device, right? One of the things that developers come across all the time is the mobile side is just such a pain on voice. Does Snips have something to offer there as well?
Well, so on device means on device, and a smartphone is a device. So our technology works equally well on a Raspberry Pi, on an NXP IMX8 platform, works equally well on an iOS device, works equally well on any Android device. And you can think TVs. TVs have often an Android stack, and can easily put Snips inside that. Now, that's for the edge side of things. Again, Snips is a runtime plus a model. We've done the hard part. It's quite easy to put this on a server, right? So we are currently, because of our approach, we do not wish to provide a SaaS service, right? But on-premises is very much on the roadmap. So if you're a company that wants to have, a centralized processing of your voice services, because perhaps the device itself is low powered and you cannot afford to deploy costly edge architectures. In that case, then maybe that's the right solution. So we have it in the roadmap. But I'm thinking, banks and insurance companies. Banks and insurance companies, they've played quite a bit with chatbots. They've played quite a bit with Amazon Alexa and Google Home. When it comes to rolling it out, the IT and security and compliance department says no way. They do not want to have voice interaction from their clients to go through a third party. So on-premises makes perfect sense. And I think pretty much all of us trust our banks to keep our data safe. At least they do best efforts for sure. And they've done that for a long time. So when you look at your app on your smartphone, looking for your bank transactions, there's no edge computing there. It's just a view and everything's stored on the server. Well, if you talk to your bank on the phone, or if you talk to your voice assistant and your voice is being processed on their cloud, that's probably fine as well. So banks and insurance companies are not creating a vortex of data capture. They have that data already. And it's all about the transaction that you do on the back end through your credit cards or otherwise. So, we do have solutions for hybrid cases, but when you think of the design of the application, the use case, then it might make sense to have a hybrid approach, being able to actually answer queries locally, but also defer to the cloud in some cases. So, we provide a solution that solves many, many headaches, that's for sure. And in Europe, with GDPR, voice is a very sensitive issue. Voice is a biometric marker. There's no reason it should be floating around the web.
Are you finding that's the primary concern with the enterprise, is that it's a trust thing between the big players who you mentioned, Google, Amazon, etc., and the company in question? Is that what the main thing that you're finding, is that it's a trust thing between the company and Alexa not wanting to send their data over to Seattle?
No, frankly, I think the issues today is that Google and Amazon and Apple are going way too fast. And companies are worried they need to jump on a bandwagon, but at the same time, they know they risk to become satellites of those companies. So it's a real issue, right? And again, Snips is building a solution in a way that was not possible a couple of years ago, right? Because simply we didn't have the algorithms or the data or the computing power on the edge. So we bring a new type of solution. It's orthogonal, but companies have a headache solving this, right? Who's distributing the voice assistant? Do they have a device? Do they have a roadmap for a device with the proper computing power? If I'm a coffee machine maker, do I have the proper CPU? No, probably I just have a microcontroller. That's all you need for buttons. But we're talking about the interface here. We're talking about the interface between the user and the service or product. And that interface is critical. Think about cars. Cars are quite amazing products. And you have teams that have spent thousands of man-years building the perfect cockpit. And what do we do when we get in? We take our smartphone, slap it in the suction cup, and there it goes, right? Thousands of man-years of cockpit design just flushed down the toilet. So these companies are going too fast, and car manufacturers are in a bind. A lot of them were trying not to sign with Alexa, not to sign with Google. And they don't like to have to ship to customers, Google Car and CarPlay. They don't want to, but they have to because that's what customers demand. And by doing so, they're probably giving up their future revenue. Because cars are no longer going to be owned. And if cars become self-driving, they will become the perfect multimedia center to capture your attention for the duration of your ride. So it's a real critical issue here, and what we're offering is sovereignty. We're offering sovereignty to the device manufacturers, to the service providers, by owning the interface in some way. So, Snips is clearly a white-branded technology that allows that. Coffee machines, cars, are operated with steering wheels and buttons. When you touch a steering wheel, it's yours. It's not sucked away in terms of operation. When you press a button, there's no GDPR issue. Your thumbprint is not being taken and analyzed elsewhere. Well, voice interfaces replace buttons. And that interface should not be delegated to some massive, gigantic centralization vortex.
Just going to say, Yann, I think you touch on what I think is actually a really interesting debate, but maybe one that doesn't get talked about too much with Alexa, with Siri, with Google Assistant being so sexy in the press. But you've got Snips, you've got Mycroft, who Kane, you and I have spoken with before. You've got Houndify. So you've got this group of companies who are trying to tackle just that, who are trying
Absolutely.
to give companies choice.
Yes, absolutely. And choice is critical because that's what is going to keep the bigger companies in check. Choice is good because not everything is one size fits all. For instance, Snips is, by virtue of being very, very specialized, is perfect for very arcane or very specific vocabulary, right? And typically Google and Apple, they don't care about the niche market. They're consumer oriented. So you need various solutions, that's for sure. But we at Snips, and Snips is probably, tell me if I'm wrong, but the only European company with such a value proposition in terms of the stack. Right? We don't do text-to-speech. But in terms of providing the full stack to implement a voice assistant, we're the only European company. When do we get to have some sovereignty in Europe? Right? How do we influence the game? So we have this ambition to be a major player in the field. And in some cases, other countries are suffering. And we decided to build support for Japanese. So we started commercializing the solution in Japan last June. And Japanese companies are also too dependent on the West Coast of the US. And Japanese companies and Korean companies are worried about China being too dominant. right? And I think Europe has an interesting contribution to bring to the table. In Europe, we are complicated. In Europe, we have a lot of neighboring countries that don't speak the same language. In Europe, I believe that we have a distinct understanding, and we are able to distinguish between what is moral and what is legal. In the US, it's a little more directed by what is illegal. So therefore, what is not illegal is moral in the US. And in China, well, it's, the state is right. So in Europe, we can build solutions that respect people in a different way. In fact, I'm sort of disappointed that the GDPR issue or the regulation doesn't raise the debate about a different type of digital society. Europe could be that digital society, Renaissance 2.0. We are in Europe the children of the Renaissance, where there is no one imposes a particular thought process. And California, with all its great achievements in tech, has a way to think that is perhaps not very subtle. In fact, there is a backlash even in California. You have a lot of people, even people early on working at those great companies, rebelling against their former employers. And they are acutely aware they've created monsters. So, you can loop in all of that. You can also think about women in AI. Who are the people building the technologies of tomorrow? And voice is a critical piece of that.
There's already, I'm pretty sure that the guys that built Viv were kind of like on some sort of, I think warpath might be the wrong word, but pretty sure they got frustrated with Siri and kind of hopped away and started building Viv, didn't they? I think that's how all that kind of started. I can see exactly what you mean. And Dustin, you mentioned the other players, Houndify and Mycroft, and obviously Snips from Europe. Yann, you said earlier on around the budgets that these companies are throwing at this thing. So, I mean, Google, every major event that's happened, you can go right the way back to the CES at the very beginning of the year, and Google were advertising like crazy, and they've continued advertising throughout the year. Amazon, I'm seeing adverts on TV all the time for Alexa. So those companies are the companies who have the purse strings, so to speak. So they're kind of in everybody's living rooms and promoting it wildly. For businesses who are looking for other options, obviously, if all you're seeing is Google and Amazon all the time, it's very difficult to understand that there might be other stuff there that might be able to serve your needs better. And these systems like Snips and some of the others, you can do a lot more with them because they're not quite as locked down as Alexa and Google might be. So you've probably got a lot more customization options in terms of being able to develop something that fully meets your needs. What I'm getting round to, Yann, is what do you think is the challenge? Obviously, is that you've got huge players with huge budgets. What is some of the solutions, do you think, for Snips and for some of the other kind of either open source players or smaller players? What's the kind of not the secret, but what's the solution for kind of raising awareness or for competing with those big players?
Well, I mean, one of the solutions we found is open sourcing, of course. Open sourcing is a way to reach people who will be decision makers down the line. When people appreciate your stack, they get used to it and they see how you think. And again, every solution is quite different. So we've actually open sourced the entire NLU piece because we started off there and we thought that this is not where there's a huge difference, except that ours runs on a super small computer, does not need big servers. So people looking for performance, they'll find it with our NLU stack. But NLU is not the hardest piece to solve in the puzzle. So this is one way to achieve critical mass, picking the specific audience. So we started off with the makers, and makers are really focused on independence and the device itself. So that made sense. But at the end of the day, we are a startup, and capital is the name of the game. In other words, how do we go from a company with 60 people, and we have extreme talent in the company. This is crazy. I mean, I'm so proud of the team, and so thrilled to be working with them on a daily basis. They beat expectations. They catch up with the state of the art. It's amazing. But talent is critical. And at some point, I was thinking with Rand, the CEO, that probably we need to grow through the UK, because the UK is next door, and in the UK you can attract talent that do not speak French or do not want to speak French. And most of the planet speaks English as a second language, certainly in high tech. So how do we grow? Capital, talent. The problem is that Google and Samsung and Amazon, they're creating R&D centers and poaching the talent in every other, in Paris. Google just opened an R&D office in Paris this week, focusing on AI. Yeah. And Facebook is working on voice as well. So it's a race. It's a race. Our closest competitor, SoundHound, raised 10 times more than us in Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley is a problem for the rest of us. Because if you don't move there, you don't get the same sort of financing either. But I don't believe that we have to move to the US. I believe that the financing chain is properly organized in Europe. We're backed by the government, for instance. We've been selected as one of the key companies in a key vertical, namely AI. But again, sovereignty, people are starting to realize that they need more of that. And I'm pretty liberal in my in my views, and I don't like the idea of protectionism. But the US is very protectionist. China is supremely protectionist. In Europe, we are not protectionist at all. Not at all. So I'm thinking, if a company in France or Europe were to choose a solution, if Snips is equally good, they should choose Snips. But not because they are nationalistic in principle, but because they need to help companies that can become their allies in building more choice, create employment locally, pay taxes locally. As you know, some of these big platforms don't pay taxes easily because, they have great people that are being paid to optimize taxes and to lobby, all these things. So again, it's all about global citizenship. How do we create something a little more distributed, decentralized, more evened out? And one of the things I regret in Europe is that we still don't have our Small Business Act. I don't know if you have one in the UK in particular. But a Small Business Act in the US typically means that a quota of the business needs to be reserved for small businesses, small companies. So therefore, a lot of the budgets are going to be routed to small companies so that they can grow. And of course, those companies are local because the Small Business Act is meant to help local companies. Now, we have none of that in France. We have none of that in Europe. And that's crazy. This is, but again, it has nothing to do with voice. It has to do with startups and large, scale-ups. In Europe, we don't produce enough scale-ups. Why? Because we don't feed them. But anyways, Snips is raising capital, has capital, is being backed by amazing funds that understand the vision and what's at stake, and also understand the opportunity. So the startup ecosystem in France, certainly, but also in Europe, has matured dramatically in the past 10 years.
Hmm. And it's only, I've been reading recently about Paris in particular, being a really, really kind of vibrant startup place, and I think London is kind of probably not far behind it, or maybe even a bit in front. I'm not sure really, but I think Europe is there's a lot going on in Europe. I think Paris and France is in the voice space. There's a lot seeming to be going on, and certainly Germany are really enthusiastic about it. The UK are starting to kind of get on board. So I think that maybe the consumer behaviour is probably slightly behind what the US is, but then that's probably where the opportunities are for companies like Snips, is that it's the voice from a consumer perspective, and the awareness from a consumer perspective is nowhere near what it is in America. So as that grows, as the device adoption grows, as people start getting more comfortable talking to stuff, the market is going to just grow and grow and grow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Kane, I think you bring up an interesting point, is companies are, at least in Europe, fighting uphill a little bit. I was speaking with a company a while back, and they were talking about, if we look in mobile, which is, mobile's been around for a while, but it's a bit of an indicator, I think, on tech savviness, perhaps. They were saying that in Japan, I think it was 90% of their traffic was on mobile, and that meant about 90% of the revenue too. In the US, it was, I think, 60% on mobile and maybe 70% of revenue. Here in Europe, excluding the UK, they said it was about 40% mobile and 25% of revenue. So you see that it's definitely coming along, I think, but it still have a ways to go, I think.
Absolutely, and Europe is more complicated, and who's better than a European to understand it and deploy services here? In the US, typical companies focus on a single market, large single market, build scale, and then they bulldoze over Europe with a lot of capital and momentum. So here it's a little more complex, but I think we have things to offer, different things to offer.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think 100%. I think that everything that you've discussed in terms of the Snips offering and how it all works and the vision and the plans, I think it's really inspiring, and I definitely will be keeping an eye out for Snips over the coming years, and I wish you and Snips all the best, and thank you so much for joining us, Yann. It's been such an interesting conversation. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, because this is as you said, fascinating, but also I think it's everyone, citizens alike, developers and decision makers. There's a question here at the core, which is the future of computing.
It's mental. I'll put the Snips link for the website and the white paper and the video you mentioned. Any other places you want to send people? If people want to kind of reach out to you or reach out to Snips, what's the best ways for them to kind of either get in touch or follow your progress?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to join the Discord group if you're a developer. If you are tempted to see how the technology works, you can easily create an account on the console and start building. But we're all pretty available and accessible.
Fantastic. Yann, thank you so much. Dustin, thank you as well.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, both.
That was Yann Lachelle, COO of Snips. Wow. What an interesting conversation that was. We did want to discuss AI in general, but I think there was so much detail in covering Snips and the product offering and blockchain and edge computing and all of these kind of things that we discussed is so interesting. I do think that Snips, as well as some of the others, Mycroft and Houndify, I really do think that there is a significant place in the market for these companies. Increasingly, people are concerned about privacy. You've got the Cambridge Analytica situation that happened with Facebook, and all of a sudden this year everyone just seems to be switched on about privacy, and I don't think that's going to go anywhere anytime soon. When you start getting into the enterprise, privacy, security, all of that stuff is fundamental challenges for the likes of Google and Amazon, and even Apple and probably even Microsoft as well with Cortana. It is a fundamental challenge because the enterprise don't want to be sending all of their data to Amazon, I don't think. I remember Josh Montgomery said that whether you like it or not, if you're in business, one of these days you're probably going to end up competing with Amazon. and I think that people might be reluctant on the enterprise side to go down the Amazon route. So I 100% see value in in Snips and the product offering and what they're trying to do. And as I said, I think that this market is only going to grow, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So the scope and opportunity for Snips is only going to grow with it as well. Really interested to see what they do with this whole blockchain thing. I'm still trying to get my head around blockchain. It seems to be something that gets spoken about a hell of a lot. I still don't fully get what the situation is, but I think it certainly does sound interesting to have a decentralized and a self-governed app store, as well as, you know, the open source model that they're looking at doing as well. Really, really interesting times. I wish Snips all the best. I hope Yann, I hope I see you soon, either in London or in Paris. Thank you so much for joining us, Yann. Thank you, Dustin, as well, for co-hosting. And as always, boys and girls, thank you so much for listening. I genuinely mean that. Thank you so much. Until next time, see you later.